You're sitting in a room with nothing but a landline phone, watching people half your age tapping away on laptops you're not allowed to touch. It's the year 2000. Everyone around you is talking about Y2K bugs and .com millions, while you're trying to figure out how to work at a cash register without violating probation. You spent 5 years locked away from the one thing you actually know, and now they're telling you that thing, the only thing you were ever good at, is off limits for 3 more years. And the strangest part, the government keeps calling. They want your opinion on computers. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I would definitely love to know. January 21, 2000, Lompoc Federal Prison, California. Kevin Mitnick walked out at 36 years old, driven away by his mother, carrying nothing most people would want. He'd served 4 years, 11 months and 6 days for wire fraud, computer fraud, and intercepting communications. The media had called him dangerous. The FBI had called him their most wanted cybercriminal. Prosecutors said he'd caused $80 million in damage, though that number kept shrinking in court until the judge ordered him to pay $4,125 in restitution. The kind of number that tells you someone was exaggerating. But none of that mattered now because the terms of his probation were simple. No computers, no software, no modems, no cellular phones, no internet access for 3 years. Nothing that could connect him to the digital world. He could use a landline phone. That was it. You know what the world looked like in 2000? Windows 2000 had just launched. People were building websites in their basements and becoming millionaires. The .com boom was still roaring. Tech consultants with half his knowledge were billing $200 an hour. And Mitnick, he couldn't legally touch a keyboard. His lawyer argued it was impossible to earn a living without computers, that even working a retail job would require using a point-of-sale system. The judge didn't care. The terms held. So Mitnick had to figure out what to do with the rest of his life in a world that had moved on without him. His first marriage had ended years earlier, partly because of his hacking obsession. He'd burned bridges. He'd been painted as a villain in books and newspapers. The New York Times had called him obese and foul-looking, though anyone who met him said he looked normal, well-groomed, even fit. But the public image stuck. And here's the thing nobody talks about. He wasn't coming out to applause. There was no Free Kevin parade waiting. Yes, there had been a movement, people who thought his sentence was excessive for someone who never sold stolen data or destroyed systems just to watch them burn. But movements don't pay rent. Supporters don't show up when you need a job. What Kevin Mitnick had in early 2000 was a reputation, a probation officer watching his every move, and no clear path forward. The months after his release were not inspiring. They were slow, grinding. He was living with restrictions that felt designed to humiliate. Probation officials initially interpreted his terms so strictly that they blocked him from writing about computers or speaking publicly about security. When he was offered $20,000 that summer to lecture at a technology conference in Utah and write reviews for a website called Contentville, his probation officer said no. Consulting work. Number magazine articles, no. He challenged this in court, arguing it violated his First Amendment rights. A judge eventually ruled in his favor, sort of. The blanket ban was too broad, the judge said, but every speaking engagement, every article, every opportunity had to be pre-approved. It was freedom with a leash. So Mitnick did what he could. He wrote. He started working on a book about social engineering, the art of manipulating people into giving up passwords and access. He couldn't use a computer to write it, so he worked with co-authors who could. He spoke when he was allowed to. He took whatever consulting gigs got approved, which wasn't many. And the whole time, he was watching the tech world explode without him. You know what makes this worse? In March 2000, just 2 months after his release, the U.S. government invited him to testify before Congress about computer security. Senator Fred Thompson wanted his expertise on how hackers could compromise critical infrastructure. Mitnick showed up under supervision and told lawmakers what they were doing wrong. Think about that. The same government that said he was too dangerous to use a computer wanted him to explain how to protect their systems. He wasn't allowed to touch a keyboard, but he could teach senators about security threats. It wasn't irony. It was a preview of what would come next, but stretched out over years of waiting. The probation period dragged. 2000 became 2001. The dot-com bubble burst. The world kept spinning. Mitnick kept his head down, hosting a radio show on KFIM 640 in Los Angeles where he could talk about security without needing a computer. He published The Art of Deception in 2002, a book that became a bestseller. But he still couldn't go online. He couldn't check email. He couldn't do anything that required logging in. People around him were building careers in cybersecurity, cashing in on the same knowledge he'd spent decades accumulating. Ex-hackers were becoming consultants, getting hired by Fortune 500 companies to break into their own systems and find weaknesses. It was exactly what Mitnick had been doing illegally for years, except now it was a legitimate industry worth millions. And he was still locked out. His girlfriend bought him a BlackBerry 6710 as a getting off probation gift in late 2002. He couldn't use it yet, just had to look at it. January 21, 2003, 3 years to the day after his release from prison. Mitnick's probation ended. He could finally use a computer again. He could go online. He could send an email. The first thing he did, he logged into his girlfriend's weblog to see what she'd been saying about him. Then he sent an email to Senator Joseph Lieberman asking for a pardon, reminding him of their earlier conversation where Lieberman had said Mitnick would make a great lawyer. He didn't get the pardon, but that didn't matter anymore. By 2003, something had shifted. The cybersecurity industry had grown into a massive business. Companies were realizing they needed people who thought like hackers to protect their systems, and who better to hire than someone who'd actually been one. Mitnick started a security consulting company called Defensive Thinking. Later, he rebranded it as Mitnick Security Consulting, LLC. The pitch was simple. He would try to break into your systems the same way a real attacker would. Social engineering, penetration testing, finding the weaknesses before someone else did. It wasn't an instant gold rush. It was methodical. He took clients one at a time. He built a reputation, this time, a legitimate one. Fortune 500 companies hired him. Government agencies hired him. He taught classes on social engineering, the same techniques he'd used to con employees into giving him passwords over the phone. By the late 2000s, Mitnick wasn't just surviving. He was becoming exactly what prosecutors had feared, an expert who understood security from the inside out. He wrote more books. The Art of Intrusion came out in 2005. Ghost in the Wires, his autobiography, was published in 2011. The Art of Invisibility followed in 2017. He became Chief Hacking Officer at KnowBe4, a security awareness training company that went public on the NASDAQ in 2021. He served on advisory boards. He spoke at conferences around the world. His custom metal business cards doubled as lockpicking kits, a reminder that the guy teaching you about security could probably still get into places he wasn't supposed to be. Estimates of his net worth vary. Some say $10 million. Others say $20 million. A few claim $25 million. The exact number doesn't matter. What matters is that he built it doing the same thing he went to prison for, except this time people were paying him to do it legally. But here's what nobody mentions. It took 8 years from the day he was arrested in 1995 to the day he could freely use the internet again in 2003. 8 years. Most of that time he was either in prison or under restrictions so tight he couldn't work in his own field. When he finally started his consulting business, he wasn't a kid anymore. He was 40 years old. The hacking world had moved on. Techniques had evolved. New vulnerabilities had been discovered. He had to catch up on nearly a decade of progress while convincing people he was worth hearing. And even then, he was working against a reputation that painted him as a criminal, not a consultant. People remembered the headlines. They remembered the FBI manhunt, the 2.5 years he spent as a fugitive using cloned cell phones and fake IDs. They remembered the books that made him sound like a cyber terrorist, not someone driven by curiosity. Mitnick's transformation wasn't a redemption story. It was a long, uncomfortable grind where the only advantage he had was knowledge that everyone else wanted, but nobody wanted to admit they needed from him. He died on July 16, 2023, at 59 years old from pancreatic cancer. At the time of his death, his wife was pregnant with their first child. By then, Mitnick Security had become a respected firm. He'd consulted for some of the biggest companies in the world. He'd testified before Congress multiple times. He'd written best-selling books. He'd spoken at conferences where people paid hundreds of dollars just to hear him talk. But it all started with a guy sitting in a room in 2000, not allowed to touch a computer, watching the world move forward without him. No miracle, no sudden clarity, just years of waiting, then years of rebuilding, then finally, quietly, success that came too slowly to feel like victory. You want to know what the takeaway is? There isn't one. Not the kind people expect anyway. Mitnick didn't learn a big lesson. He didn't find redemption through suffering. He just had something people wanted and eventually figured out how to sell it without going to prison. That's it, that's the whole thing. And if you're sitting there thinking you would have done it differently, you probably wouldn't have. Most people don't, and that's my opinion, so what about yours? Let me know in the comments.